Well, just in case you don't know what one looks like, I added some to the first slide. All of these have helpfully shown up on my computer during the time period in which I have attempted to study this topic, including when I was trying to write a grant for one, which I ended up quoting some of the text on the front of it because it was so atrocious. Software updates at a very intrinsic level take a piece of software that already exists on a device and change it. They alter it to something else. Now, they may improve the security, they may add new features, they may do different elements, but at a fundamental level, it is changing it. My particular area is in computer security, so that's where I'm coming from for motivating this work. But in most of the statements and suggestions I'm making, you could easily add the words bugs, features, or many of the other components that motivate why these things are released and what they're used for. And at heart, the biggest problem here is that writing perfect code is effectively impossible. We know this from a security perspective. Even if you go through every single line of your own code, the odds that something you're sitting on top of or that you're depending on or some library is going to not be bug-free as well is almost zero. And even if you manage to get all of that right, all it takes is the next new whiz-bang feature next week for you to need to release a new feature of your own. And it's because of this, software needs to continually evolve. In order to do that, you really see it going through this cycle. So you start with a device that's, say, fully updated. Some horrible thing gets released out on the news. It tells you about this horrible vulnerability. It's been here forever. We're all going to perish, and every computer is going to be infected. Hopefully some developers find a way to fix that. We issue an update, and this is how we solve it, right? We figured out how to do it. We now have a solved problem. We push the update out. Hopefully people install it. And then we move back to this state. If any of these links break, we stop having updated software. In this particular talk, I'm interested in this link, which is the point where we have an update. It is available. It does exist. We have now solved the problem. But for one reason or another, people aren't necessarily installing that. And I want to give you a sense of the scale of this problem. So this is an incident that happened in 2014. It's one of the few that I can find numbers for. What happened is Yahoo was a victim of a malicious advertising attack. So they were serving out an ad that had malware in it. They were serving ads to 300,000 people an hour that had malicious software. Now, the good news is that only about 9% of those were vulnerable. And the difference between the 91% and the 9% is that the 91% had updated. They were no longer vulnerable to these attacks. But 9% is not small. It is 27,000 people an hour. They were infecting 27,000 people an hour. So why is it? Why did that 9% choose not to update? And conversely, why do we have 91% that did? We have very little understanding of what actually causes people to install these things, not install these things, or even what the process looks like. I was going to go and add a bunch of related work into this, but my neighbor on the airplane summarized just about all the related work in about one sentence. Updates mess everything up. And most of this talk is trying to untangle this word mess everything up into something a little bit more scientific than that. Perhaps put a little bit better, what does updating software look like from the perspective of an end user? What process and sequence are they actually going through? So in order to do this, we did a survey in Mechanical Turk. We asked people to just tell us about an update event. Tell us about an event. It could be positive, it could be negative, it could be an event where we've decided not to install an update. We gave them a big empty text box. And then we asked them to do 17 follow-up questions based on our prior work, so things like, how did you become aware of the update? And then, because we were very suspicious they were all going to rant at us about terrible things happening to them, we asked them to give us a contrasting story. So if they told us that they'd given us a negative story up front, we asked them for a positive one. We got 307 responses. Every single one of those gave us at least one usable story. This is rare on Mechanical Turk. We didn't have to throw out anybody. They all hated this sufficiently to give us a real answer. We were correct to be concerned. Almost half of them gave us a negative answer up front, but we asked for both. One interesting thing about this is that we are looking at overly technical users. This is somewhat normal for Mechanical Turk. We threw in a secondary level of question beyond the have you ever worked in a technical field. We also asked them, about their own self-efficacy. So how often do others ask you for help, and how often do you ask other people for help? They all felt that everyone always asked them and that they never ask anyone. This is important, though, because while, in my opinion, updates do not change, really, depending on your technical skill level. If you have a different device, that will change. But the update events, if you're on Windows, don't change depending on whether you're a novice or a more advanced user. But a more advanced user is more likely to notice it. I will also argue that the stories you're about to see, most of those are the sort of things that they're probably telling their less technical neighbors. So while this is a biased sample, it is a very interesting one. So what we did was we did qualitative coding on the set. Myself and my co-author went through them. We have a very detailed explanation in our paper exactly how we did this. We coded the entire set for different topics, and then we did a thematic analysis. One of the things that came very strongly out of that was that events that happen to people are about what you would expect. They're upset about rebooting. They're upset about the UI. They're upset about their battery dying. But things that they're concerned about are highly linked to what point they are in the update when they happen. So this is just a suggestion of what the subcodes were for installation. So they're concerned about things like time, cost, resources, problem, failures, restarts, bundled software. But some of these are explained in different ways and in different contexts depending on the point they are in the update. And so because I only have so much time in this presentation, I'm actually going to try to demonstrate that with resources. So resources were one of the things that were talked about extensively, but they're talked about very different ways and different points in the update process. So awareness. So how did people become aware that an update even existed? So a lot of them talked about things like automatic updating or discovering a problem or all these sorts of things. Resources actually key into this. Some updates won't start until a resource is available. So they won't start until you have a Wi-Fi connection, for example, or they won't. According to Microsoft, it will never do this thing that's currently happening to one of the speaker's computers unless it's plugged into a power source. They swear this to me, but I've observed it happening one too many times without a power source. So resources impact how these devices, when they do and when they don't update and when something shows up. So this particular story here is talking about how this user went and there was an update, they'd learned about it, they did not want it installed, so they ended up disabling their Wi-Fi until they could figure out how to disable the update, because it was one of their only ways of managing it and becoming aware. So deciding, one of the interesting things about an update screen is it's effectively this enormous wall that you can't see the other side of. And so you have to guess what's on the other side of it. You either guess based on prior experience, maybe you go out and you research what happens, you think about what happened last time, you decide how much you actually care if this game gets broken versus how much you actually care if PowerPoint goes down, and then make decisions based on that. Resources were a big topic here in terms, particularly with researching. So this is a very typical comment. Everyone was saying that the update would drain my battery life quicker, so I didn't install. Conversely, people who do install, this sentence almost goes the other way around. My battery life was terrible, and the new update says that it's going to solve this, so I hit the installation button. Preparation. This is the one that we didn't actually think about up front, and therefore we never even asked participants about it, but it came out very strongly. You think that you just hit this installation button and then everything goes. No. People are very concerned about updates breaking things, so they'll take preparation-type behaviors. They might have to go and find a laptop to back up onto. Apple users, which is the source of this quote, are very concerned about their hard drive space. So first, I'm told that I haven't got enough space to perform the update. So I had to dig around and delete some apps I didn't want. It needed 1.6 gigabytes on an 8 gigabyte phone. So that's not a small percentage required here. So these users were delaying updates. They were stopping these various updates, usually operating system level updates, ones that do actually bundle a good bit of security changes, because they didn't have enough space in their phone to hold them, and so they needed to wait for an extended time period. Some other people talked about other resources such as power. So I mentioned the triggering on a particular a resource earlier. Some people had to go relocate in order to go find something. Another story was this long explanation of someone attempting to update an Xbox when they did not, in fact, have internet at home. Xbox don't relocate. So they basically had to download it somewhere, take it back, it'd fail, and they go back. It's long epic because just getting the preparation can be tricky. Installation. So during the installation process itself, we again start running into resource type problems. Installing it all will take up some part of the processor power. Obviously, it blocks sometimes usage of the application itself. This particular person is discussing Windows Update, which automatically kicks on. So I know this surprises many people. Windows does not actually typically reboot during an update. You only notice it when it does. But it will pop in the background and just start sneakily installing things if you have it installed on auto update. So in this case, Windows Update drains my processing resources, preventing backups and even stopping me from running stat software for my job. And so this person went in and tried to figure out how to disable this because it was causing them so much trouble. Troubleshooting. So troubleshooting obviously happens at any different point during this. We found a lot of issues involving an update that successfully installed but changed things in a way that was not necessarily positive. So this user actually had a nice, had a good experience in that they did not end up with a final bad state, but they had to deal with troubleshooting, and the troubleshooting involved a large use of resources. So I updated my Steam gaming platform and lost every game I had on it. I was pretty mad because my internet is slow and it took forever to download the games again. There was a fair number of people that talked about issues involving settings, involving content, involving all these sorts of things that might vanish during an update, and then you have to pull them back down, which may require a lot of data usage, which can be expensive for some people, and require a lot of time, and so it blocks out time. PostState. So this is actually not a typical comment. When we discuss happy users, so people who told us a good story people tended to talk about PostState and about what it was like beforehand. So they'll talk about how terrible this thing was, and then you installed an update and everything got better. It got faster, it got less battery usage, I got a new feature, I got a new game, I got a new button. People who were less positive tended to look a little bit more like this. So again, talking about afterwards, performance in the device was poor due to all the added features and software. So they felt that this was really bloating up things. All right, so that's kind of the process going down through looking at all the different points. Now what I'm going to do is just cherry pick a point that I found to be very interesting out of the deciding section. This was not very large within my subject group, but I can tell you that when I do presentations in front of younger people, so high school students, etc., I almost always get this question. And so it was fascinating to also see it within the data set. Do updates contain viruses? I get this in large crowds, frequently actually. And we see it in the data set as well. So QuickTime comes with an add-on software. Some of the software has viruses and can harm the computer. It also has redirects and takes over search engines. I decided not to do updates unless I really need it. Are you getting what they're actually talking about? They're not talking about a virus. They're talking about this thing. I want you to really think about what that thing does. I couldn't, unfortunately, find a good one of the Java update that happened. Java also has an added feature you can opt out of, whereby it will alter your default search engine, changing it to Yahoo. People really saw these as viruses, because if you think about what viruses do, according to the average consumer, they change your user interface around to a bad thing. They start popping up ads, and they change your search engines and all your settings. When Mozilla decided to change default search engines from Google to Yahoo, I suddenly ended up with a ton of faculty in my office. I think I have a virus. This virus has shown up. It's changed all of my settings. I have a Mac. I don't understand how this happened to me. This is actually a fascinating result, just because it shows how this decision that has more to do with marketing and partnership is actually causing people to react towards viruses, or towards updates, as if they were viruses. And while the quote I showed is very particular, I saw quite a few other people within the data set using virus-type terminology when referring to this sort of a situation. Keep in mind we have an overly technical user base. So they would do things like say, oh, I accidentally failed to uncheck this box, and then I had to go through and uninstall this thing that I didn't want, and then I ran my virus scanner 3 times to make certain it was gone. The other thing that this did was it causes delays, because what happens is cognitively, I know if this thing is going to exist in there, that I have to go and pause and make certain that I don't miss that checkbox, because if I miss that checkbox, that's half an hour of my life. And because of that, I will not just idly hit one of these buttons. I actually delay it to a point in time in which it is possible to make certain that I have time to go through all the boxes and make sure that I haven't checked one. And this is inserting delays, which, again, from a security perspective, is very problematic. All right, so in conclusion, we went and we looked at the process of updating. Please do look at the paper. We go into many different aspects of what happens at each of these stages. Coming out of this, 3 of the recommendations we make in the paper is that it's really important for you to make it easy for users to find information about your updates. They do go out looking, and when they can't find it, they have to either assume the worst or trust you. Be conscientious of the resource usage, not just in the post-installation, but actually what's happening during the actual installation, and making certain that actually you have to be plugged into power before it starts updating. And provide a recovery path. A lot of our post users were very happy when they could just roll stuff back when it was bad, and they made them less concerned about hitting the go button. All right, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Nan Chen from University of Washington. Great talk and very interesting topic. And I wonder, because my own experiences is that usually the updates comes at a point that I really don't want it to be updated, and so that is kind of being accumulated as a negative sentiment toward any kind of update. I just want to ignore that. Does any kind of users give these kind of comments?
So particularly when it's talking about automated updates, we had several users who are like, why isn't this done for everything? Mm-hmm. I desperately want this. Mm-hmm. And then I have another percentage of users who are like, this thing horribly updated when I wasn't paying attention and I had to go and completely disable it. In my personal opinion, what's actually happening is it involves risk. Mm-hmm. And there's very little way for someone to express their risk aversion involving updates right now. You pretty much have on, off, and ask me. Mm-hmm. And those are your only options. And you see groups like Microsoft is now moving towards Windows 10 where you just cannot disable updates at all. I'm starting to hear stories from people who are in permanent update loops where they just cannot get out.
Yeah.
That's only if you update to Windows 10. You have someone behind you, so you might...
I just quick add one. Do you consider to extend this study to some software developers who have lots of different software packages, but they don't really update that?
In my opinion, actually, the next best group is system administrators.
Okay.
I do agree that software developers are another group we should definitely look at, but I think the next one we're trying mostly for is system administrators, because you look at things like Heartbleed, and Heartbleed is still having a third of the internet not patched. That's a big problem. So, yeah, that is a direction we're looking into.
Thank you.
Hi, Wendy Makai from INRIA in France. Very nice work. I really enjoyed that. It seems to me that there's a fundamental issue that users have in terms of informed consent, right? But it's not informed consent is the problem. And there's a huge difference between getting a security update and something that changes the user interface. And one of the problems is that users, having a security update that protects me is a good thing, right? And that's what I want to do. But I'm one of those people who have, been clicking on a button for a year and a half that says update now, in an hour, or remind me tomorrow. And every day I go into the remind me tomorrow, and it's been a year and a half. And that's because I don't trust what's going to happen with the user interface because I've had so many bad experiences. How hard is it to separate those out? Why can't we keep those separate? Why does that have to be an integrated thing where the user doesn't have the knowledge and the ability to make that decision?
I'm actually going to give 2 answers to that. So one of them, the short version is it costs money to do the testing. That's that's the abbreviated short version. It costs a lot of time and effort to do the quality assurance testing, and every time you issue 2 separate updates, they have to work on different streams. You've now forked effectively what's going on, and tests have to occur on both of those. Microsoft is perhaps one of the only companies that allows you to selectively install updates. There are very few. There's a couple others, and there are a couple others that will allow you to install security updates only on particular strains of the software, but they're not very many. The other direction, and kind of where I thought you were perhaps taking this, is why are we seeing automatic updates now? So, I mean, why wasn't this going on from the beginning? And the answer is actually legal. It's a really fascinating answer, because if you look at the way companies or countries work, a lot of the hacking laws basically say if you don't ask someone and you reach into their computer without asking them and you change stuff around without telling them, we call that hacking, and that might be illegal. And so what you've seen is groups with a lot of lawyers, so Google, Microsoft, trying the waters here, and that seems to have gone reasonably well. And now we're seeing this mass group from other groups that allow it. And because of that, you're starting to see more push. But I am in complete agreement. I would love to see us start making people more aware, making them more aware of particular content of updates. And I remember suddenly the second one is, the better question is, why can't we disentangle the UI from the security in time within a single stream?
Yeah.
So why can't we push a security update not bundled with the user interface update, and then give people more time to adjust to user interface updates without creating the security problems?
Although people don't adjust slowly.
No.
It's always falling off a cliff. So people say, so I've seen this in research we've done a long time ago, but you can wait and you say, oh, well, we'll give people a year to adjust to the new thing. And what will happen is at the end of the year, they will fall off the cliff and have to deal with the new one. So unless you have some kind of gradual adoption of the new user interface, you still have a problem. Anyway, it's a very interesting topic. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I'm in discussions with people about how to do trying out of the new software.
Last question. Hi, I'm Peggy G from UC Berkeley. Very interesting results. I'm curious, so the majority of software updates are like those screens that you show that there are some text and then versions and terms and conditions, but there's no sense like what kind of information is updated, as you mentioned. But there are also like more and more updates that will show the list of things that's changed, and also some kind of give you blurbs about what's good about that. So even better, maybe show some visual changes, like, okay, with a new update, maybe there are some better features that you might want to consider. So I wonder, what are your thoughts on having more material to show for the software updates and kind of engage users to encourage them to update the software?
The short version is that's kind of the thing we're trying to work on next. No. So there are a couple different places where people talk about software updates. We'd love to go through those in code and see what sort of things they're talking about, and then try and actually experiment with answering some of those questions for updates and see what it does for update decision making. If it makes people feel better about the update, or if it changes their decision, or if it's a complete waste of time, I don't know. But it would be really interesting to find out, because I do think that would be highly impactful.